Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody's doing good today. And this afternoon, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk a little bit about buzzbaits and specifically how buzzbaits have stood the test of time, because they have been around forever. And I just sort of wanted to go over that a little bit because I have been not only catching a lot of fish on buzzbaits over the last couple months, but I've been reading about people catching fish on buzzbaits over the last couple months. Tournaments are still getting won on it. There's been tournaments won on it this spring and this summer. And to be honest with you guys, it really amazes me that a buzzbait continues to be as productive as it does. And I first saw a buzzbait, I was at Rod and Reel Resort at Table Rock Lake in 1975, I believe. And I remember this was like a mom and pop little resort. And I remember when we walked in to check in with my mom and dad, up on the wall, they had a few fishing lures up there. And I remember they had one that said Lunker Lure on it. And I actually took this, they gave it to me off the wall. It was an old, I had it forever and I've lost it. I don't know what happened to it, but it was an old cardboard, basically just a piece of cardboard stuck up on the wall. And it had these buzzbaits on them. And they were the original Lunker Lure. Back then, they had a flat head on them and they were tied with a bucktail skirt. And I looked at those things and I go, first of all, I didn't even know they were supposed to be fished on top water. I just saw the blade on there. And even back, and I was just a little kid then, and I remember looking at it, it's like, there's no way a fish is ever going to hit one of those things. And I didn't even give it any more thought. I didn't know how you fished it or what the deal was. I thought it was like a spinnerbait or something. But this was back in the mid-70s. And gradually people started using these things, and I started reading about Rick Clunn won a tournament back in the 1976 or 1975 or 76 down at Cordell Hole on it. Then again, Clunn went on to win the Bassmaster Classic using a buzzbait, I think some in the 1976 Classic. You had some buzzbaits called the Floyd's Buzzer, which was an inline buzzer that started becoming real popular. And people started catching fish on buzzbaits. And then there was a period of time over a couple decades where you just didn't really hear that much about it. And then there was sort of been a resurgence in the buzzbait over the last 5 or 6 years. It's always been what people consider a real situational lure. And you look at the things and it's like, they don't look that great. I mean, they look like something that is just not real attractive to a fish there. I mean, it does. I mean, the blade, the way it's set up, and the skirt. There's nothing realistic about this thing. It's probably the most unrealistic looking bait that I've ever seen as far as, for a fishing lure goes. On top of that, this thing telegraphs itself. Unbelievable. I mean, buzzbaits are noisy. They all sound the same. They've got a clacking noise coming across the surface. The fundamental blade shape has not changed at all. This is the Megabass Jamaican Boa buzzbait, which is like as high tech as they get. But basically, this structure of the buzzer has not changed over the past 50 years. So the question remains is, why do bass still hit this thing? I mean, because other baits that have, that were popular 50 years ago, like the jitterbug and the hula popper and the hellbender and the little plastic worms with the inline spinners on those things, yeah, you might still be able to catch a bass here and there on them, but for the most parts, they've faded away. Yet the buzzer has stood the test of time, and it's still a key bass fishing lure. It still wins tournaments. Pros still throw it regularly. It's still a mainstay in fishing. And I don't really get it because, bass, they're smart. They've evolved to be educated. They get educated real quick on certain baits and certain profiles. And certain things become more productive for short periods of time, and then they fade off. You look at baits like, say, for example, the Alabama rig, something like that. You look at the Whopper Plopper, baits that have gotten real hot, then they still produce a little bit, but they gradually go down in effectiveness. And buzzbaits are one of those things. So I've analyzed this a little bit, and this is sort of my conclusion. One of the reasons I think that buzzbaits continue to be so productive is the fact that there's a couple different elements of these things that change all the time. First of all, the sizes. You've got buzzbaits in a lot of different sizes here. This is a big 1/2 ounce model here, but you also got a lot of buzzers like in the little 1/4 ounce size. You can see the difference on it. So you have the ability to mimic a lot of different sizes on the things. You also have a lot of different, blade configurations and colors. In addition to the silver, you got a lot of black blades, gold. You got just a lot of different, ways that you can modify that. It'll modify the profile of the bait. It'll modify the sound of the bait, and just give the fish a little different look. On top of that, you've also got retrieve ratios. The buzz bait is not a bait that you just throw out there and reel straight in a lot of times. You put action on it, you twitch it, you shake it, like I said, gives it a different type of look. You can also tweak the sound of the buzzers by filing some of the shafts down sometimes, bending some of the blades. There's some things that you can do to it to tweak it a little bit, but ultimately it's still the same. It's a squeaking loud bait that comes across the surface of the water. The only thing that I can figure is that bass are curious, bass are opportunistic feeders, and bass, they strike off a reaction a lot of times. And sometimes a buzz bait, it is one of those baits that creates a reaction strike. It's not necessarily a bait that I think the fish are trying to get like an injured bait fish. It doesn't look or sound anything like an injured bait fish, but it creates a sound and a movement in the water that capitalizes on that fish's reaction instincts that they just can't help themselves. They're predators. They've survived for millions of years on this planet by being predators and being opportunistic. And there's something about a buzz bait that generates that reaction strike that causes them to be a reactionary feeder based upon instinct like that. So that's the only thing that I can figure about it. It just doesn't, I am so surprised every year that people continue catching fish on the things. And for me, a buzzbait, I have a small window. I've got like a window of I like it in the late pre-spawn and the early spring. That's when I catch a lot of fish on a buzzbait. But I don't throw it in a lot of different times during the course of the year, which is a mistake. I know some guys, they throw a buzzbait from the time the water gets 50 degrees all the way through the spring and summer and fall until it drops into 50 degrees. And they catch a lot of fish on it. They win tournaments on the thing too. But anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there a little bit. I'd be curious to hear your guys' viewpoint on it. Let me know about your experience with buzzers, why you think they're still effective. It's one of those baits that puzzles me. I understand why baits like a Cinco and a soft plastic jerkbait continue to produce because they don't telegraph themselves. But a buzz bait is one, to me, that just stumps me a lot of time, that it still works as good as it does. Because everybody throws them, the bass hear them all the time, but they still work. So anyway, just a thought, guys. I hope you all are having a good day. We'll check in later. See you.